to achieve fulfillment in our lives, but help others do the same.
If you're ready to dive into a program that will fully equip you in understanding yourself and how you move through life, and teaches you skills to be able to continue that positive movement.
I've been a student for more than 18 years in various studying opportunities, and I don't think ever enjoying learning as much as I enjoy it now.
I recommend it highly to everyone who would like to be more happier, to live the fulfilled life, to feel yourself like authentic, to be happy, to smile all the time, and to have some sparkles in their eyes.
It doesn't matter if you're a coach or a professional psychologist or have nothing to do with positive psychology yet. It would be a great journey for you.
Join me on this journey so that you can help yourself, your family, your colleagues or students enjoy higher levels of happiness, and through that, better health and more success.
Thank you for being those who really change the world.
Such a great honor to be here. Thank you, Andres, for putting this amazing conference together. Thank you all for being here. Before I go and talk about happiness, let me talk a little bit about a concern that I have. You have been sitting down for a very long time. You may be feeling a little bit tired. This concerns me. You know, it reminds me of a story of a professor who comes to class one day and suddenly he notices that one of his students has fallen asleep. It happens. So the professor calls the student who was sitting right next to the sleeping beauty and says to him, "Excuse me, do you mind waking up your friend?" To which the student responds, "Professor, with all due respect, you put him to sleep, you wake him up. But I promise that I will not wake you up, you can sleep away." Because sleep is important for happiness, and it's not always easy being happy. You know, I got into this whole field of the science of happiness because of my own unhappiness. I was an undergraduate studying at Harvard in computer science, and I found myself in my second year doing very well academically, doing very well in sports, I played squash, doing quite well socially, and yet being very unhappy. And I remember waking up one very cold Boston morning, going to my academic advisor and telling her that I'm switching majors. And she said, "What to?" And I said, "Well, I'm leaving computer science and moving over to philosophy and psychology." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Because I have two questions. First question, why aren't I happy? Second question, how can I become happier?" And it's with these two questions that I then went on to get my undergraduate degree, then across the Atlantic to the other Cambridge to study education, and back to Harvard for my PhD, all the time focusing on how can I help myself, individuals, couples, organizations, and nations lead a happier life. Now, the question that I'm so often asked is, why do you study happiness and why should I study happiness? Look at our world today. Look at the problems that we have, whether it's racism, whether it's deep fake, whether it's oppression, whether it's hunger. Talk about happiness in such a world? That's irresponsible. We should be talking about depression, anxiety. We should be talking about hardship. So here is my answer. Yes, we should be talking about all those things. We should be talking about racism and deep fake, and we should be talking about depression and anxiety, and we should be talking about and studying happiness. Why? First, because happiness is good in and of itself. We all want to be happier. We all want our children, the people we love, to be happier. In addition, if you increase levels of happiness even by a little bit. I'm not talking radical transformation here. I'm talking 3-4% increase in levels of happiness. What do you get? You get people who are kinder and more generous toward others. You find less violence. Teamwork in organizations, in schools, between nations improves. As well as depression and anxiety go down. So increase happiness for its own sake, as well as a way to combat all those afflictions that are part of our world. So what I want to do now is share with you some of what I've learned over the last 25 years in my journey, from mine and other people's research. I'm going to share it with you, but only very briefly, because we don't have that much time. Andreas told me just before coming on stage that he wants you all out of this room by midnight. So I'll be very brief. The first topic that I want to talk about is the permission to be human. I first thought of this idea the first year when I taught a class in positive psychology. That first year, 8 students signed up for my class. 2 of them dropped out, which left me with a broken ego. And I was having lunch one day, and a student who wasn't in my class comes towards me and says, "Tal, may I join you for lunch?" And I said, "Sure." So he sits down and he says, "Tal, I hear you're teaching a class on happiness." And I said, "That's right, positive psychology." And he said, "My roommates are taking your class." There were 2 of the 6 students, so I really had to be nice to him. And then he said, "But you know, Tal, now that you're teaching this class, you've got to be careful." I said, "What?" He said, "Tal, you've got to watch out." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because if I see you unhappy, I'll tell my roommates." And I actually used that in class the following day when I addressed my students, all 6 of them. I said, "You know, the last thing in the world that I want you to think is that I'm always happy, or that you, by the end of the semester, will experience a constant high. There are only 2 kinds of people who do not experience painful emotions, such as sadness, or anger, or envy, or frustration, or anxiety. 2 kinds of people who do not experience painful emotions. The first kind of people who don't experience painful emotions are the psychopaths. The second kind of people who don't experience painful emotions are dead, exactly. So if you experience painful emotions, it's actually a good sign. It means you're not a psychopath and you're alive. It's a good place to start. We can build on that. The problem in today's culture is that painful emotions have received a bad reputation. And we think that there is something wrong with us when we experience sadness or envy or anxiety. When in fact, there's something wrong with us if we don't. And the problem is, as I'll talk about, when we suppress these emotions, when we reject them, they only grow stronger. The first step towards happiness is allowing in unhappiness. The first step towards happiness is allowing in unhappiness, giving ourselves the permission to experience the full range of human emotions. You know, the best lesson that I learned when I first became a father was from our pediatrician. David was born 15 years ago in Boston. He was born at 1 a.m. At around 7 a.m., our pediatrician came into our room. The pediatrician, the doctor, checked up on Tammy, my wife, checked up on David. For some reason, he didn't check up on me. They were doing great. And then he left. But before he left, he said, "Oh, and one more thing," he said. "Over the next few months, you're going to be experiencing every single kind of emotion to the extreme. You're going to experiencing extreme joy and extreme frustration, extreme love and extreme anxiety. Every emotion to the extreme." And then he said, "It's fine, it's normal, we all go through it." And he left. best advice that I got after David was born. Let me share with you why. So after about a month, I started to feel some envy towards David. Why? Because here was someone who was getting more attention from my wife than I was, no matter how much I cried. Now, my wife and I, we had been together since the age of 14. This was a first. So I felt envy towards him. Now, normally I would say to myself, wow, what a hypocrite you are. What a terrible father you are. Envious of your own son? But because I had the doctor's voice in my head telling me, it's fine, it's natural, we all go through it, I gave myself the permission to be human and allowed the emotion to flow through me, and it left just as it came in. Did not overstay its welcome. You see, there is a paradox at play. And the paradox is that when we suppress painful emotions, whether it's envy, whether it's anxiety, when we suppress painful emotions, these emotions only intensify, they grow stronger. Let me demonstrate through an experiment. I'm a psychologist, I like experiments, but I promise this one doesn't hurt, don't worry. So here is what I'd like you to do. What I'd like you to do is, for the next 10 seconds, do not think of a pink elephant. Do not think of a pink elephant. You know the one I'm talking about? Dumbo with the big ears? Okay. Do not think of a pink elephant. One more second, and I'm sure, well, I saw pink elephants all around. Why? Because when we try to suppress, reject a natural phenomenon, such as imagining a word that we hear over and over again, that phenomenon intensifies. The same with painful emotions. Painful emotions are a natural phenomenon. When we try to suppress them, what happens? They intensify. You know, the biggest challenge that I had to face when I decided that my calling in life was to be a teacher, the biggest challenge was that I'm an introvert. I'm shy. I get very anxious and nervous around a large audience. And for me, a large audience is anything above 5. So that first year when I taught was a real challenge. Today, let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, definitely a challenge today. But in the past, the way I dealt with it, you know, being an athlete, I would go on stage, or before I would go on stage, I would say to myself, okay, Tal, don't be nervous, don't be anxious. And what do you think happened? Pink elephants all around. Whereas after reading Viktor Frankl's On Paradoxical Thinking and reading Daniel Wagner on ironic processing, essentially saying that we need to give ourselves the permission to be human, I allowed the anxiety to flow through me. I was nervous standing here just a few minutes ago. I didn't fight it. You know what I did? I smiled and I said, wow, I'm not a psychopath and I'm alive. How fortunate can one get? And yes, there was the anxiety. I allowed it to flow through me and it went away just as it came. Does not overstay its welcome. Now imagine this. Imagine waking up every morning and saying to yourself, I refuse to accept the law of gravity. I've had it with the law of gravity. You know, it's so cumbersome to wake up in the morning and to walk down the stairs and up the stairs. I would much rather float to work. Now, let's say you did not accept the law of gravity. Well, for one, you may not survive for long, especially if you live high up. But even if you do survive, you would lead a life of constant frustration. Instead, we accept the law of gravity. In fact, we embrace it and we play games with it. Imagine playing soccer without the law of gravity. Imagine the Olympics without the law of gravity. And here comes the high jump. Meaningless. Instead of rejecting the law of gravity, we embrace it, we play games with it. Not so with painful emotions. And we ignore the fact that painful emotions are as much part of human nature as the law of gravity is part of physical nature. We embrace the one, we reject the other, and we pay a price. The price that we pay is that our painful emotions intensify. There is another price that we pay. And that is that when we suppress painful emotions, what we're also doing is we're also suppressing pleasurable emotions. Why? You see, all of our emotions, no exceptions, flow through the same emotional pipeline. One pipeline, not two. When we block the pipeline for one set of emotions, the painful ones, we're also inadvertently blocking the pleasurable ones. In other words, if I don't give myself the permission to be human, to experience sadness and envy and anxiety, then what I'm doing is I'm also preventing myself from experiencing joy and love and generosity and kindness. In the words of Golda Meir, who was the Israeli Prime Minister in the 1970s, those who don't know how to weep with their whole heart don't know how to laugh either. Now, when I talk about the permission to be human, I'm not saying just resign to your emotions. There's nothing you can do about it. Just be sad, just be envious, just be anxious, go and watch TV. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is active acceptance. Accepting the emotion, whatever it is, and then choosing the most appropriate course of action. You see, there are no good or bad emotions. There are painful and pleasurable ones, but there are no good or bad emotions. Feeling envy towards my son or best friend doesn't make me a bad person. It makes me human. Acting on that envy, now that's very different. That could be immoral. Feeling fear, experiencing fear doesn't make me a coward. You see, courage is not about not having fear. Courage is about having fear and going ahead anyway. Now, what does it mean to embrace the emotions? Well, it could be to shed a tear, to cry. It could be to keep a journal, to write down our feelings, to allow them to flow through us. It could be to go to a therapist or to talk to our best friend, our BF, and to share what's on our minds and hearts. It's allowing these emotions to flow through us and then choosing the most appropriate course of action. The permission to be human, the foundation of a happy life, is first and foremost truly, really allowing in unhappiness. The next topic that I want to talk about is something that you may not have dealt with before, but indulge me, allow me to talk about it. What I want to talk about is